This is by far the most globalized conference we've had here in years. Certainly COVID is one reason, but I continue to be amazed by the impact that our graduates are having all over the world. And one country we haven't heard from so far in this conference is Sweden, where not only has there been the development of a Swedish crime harm index, which you're going to hear all about shortly, but I think a record number of reads for any crime harm index article, with the exception of the original one here in the UK. But we're very lucky to have one more example of somebody who took an MST, completed a distinguished police career, and is now affiliated with a university. In fact, one named after the incredible scientific work of Carl Linnaeus, who invented genus, species, and all the other categorizations in biology. So at Linnaeus University, she is now engaging in telling lots of police officers and would-be police officers about evidence-based policing, in which a key tool is now the Swedish Crime Harm Index. Please welcome Maj-Britt Rinaldo Runnebro.
Speaking over here in Cambridge is just fantastic to be allowed to come back and tell about the development of the Swedish Crime Harm Index, but also legislation that has had to be looked at, and also the implementation that I will speak a little bit about today. What happened was that I came to Stockholm Criminology Symposium, I think that was 2011 and 2012, and I heard Professor Sherman speaking about that crime are not equal, and he mentioned his Cambridge Crime Harm Index, and I went to be totally, influenced by this, and I got a virus of evidence-based policing too by coming over here. So I really had an idea coming over from the very beginning that I wanted to do something about this in Sweden, and the possibility came along. In 2015, I presented my master thesis, and I was on the stage at that time telling about how I went along to do this. It was released in 2015, and what happened was that I had to ask judges to estimate what would be the sentence for different kind of crimes, and I had to tunnel down quite a lot of it, because from the beginning we did it on the crime codes, and the crime codes at that time was nearly 500, and it would have taken several days for the judges to go through it. So I decided to do only for persons that would be facing a violent crime of any kind out in the public, where police could be policing. And it ended up to be 118 different crime codes, mainly physical assaults, sexual crimes, robberies, and also criminal offenses like threats against the person out in public places. It was put onto the crime code from 2014, and since then there have been a lot of new crime codes added into it. I also put it on to try and see if this really worked. So we got a system called Hobbit, and it was an old version. It couldn't do everything I wanted, but anyhow, I did put it onto the map, and I could see, so do you see the small squares? That is the numbers of crimes that is counted like hotspots. We had 4 hotspots at a time, but when I put it on to put also my index onto it, it ended up that I also had 4 places actually 3 places in the very center of Gothenburg, and about 1.4 kilometers outside at one big square. And for the rest, I started to calculate time of the week, time of every day, and then time during the days, just to be sure about that I could tell when do the police officers really do the hotspot policing. Because I thought that even though we had hotspots that was more or less overlapping up to nearly 50% with the crime harm spots, we still had to police both those that are only crime harm spots and only hotspots. So I found one place no one ever talked about, and that's the red one outside the very center of Gothenburg city. In this area, there is a lot of buses, a lot of community things that come in, like the trams are coming along as well. There is a street, but at this time developing a lot of restaurants, pubs, and also rave parties going on. Everything that we heard about this designing out crime by cleaning up the streets earlier this morning, that would have been a good thing to do in this area. 2 years after my crime harm was presented, one of the police chiefs in Gothenburg said, well, we need to do something about this street. He had been on my presentation, but then he said, yeah, I think we should use the crime harm index from Cambridge, but it was not the Swedish crime harm index, and the legislation in UK and the legislation in Sweden is not the same. So now we add the Swedish crime harm index onto it instead. I had to do this by hand. That's why it looked very strange to many others that presented. Nowadays, we got all this nice equipment in the police. I could make a totally new map and put it onto it, and you would see the same, but still different and more like a computer thing of it. What also was discovered was that if we only did the hotspots, we would miss 50% of the crime harm spots. And if we only did the crime harm spots, we would miss 53% of the hotspots. And this was a time when we found this overlapping thing, where we could do the hotspot policing both for harm and for high level of crime. So hopefully this is something that we now continue doing within the Gothenburg area. We got quite many replications on my work from the very beginning, and we will look at two different now. One, this is from the south of Sweden. Malmö is the city, it's just on the opposite side of the water from Copenhagen in Denmark. It's well known because of their shootings, but I would say it's a fantastic city when it comes to everything else, so it's not that you need to be afraid if you come over here. So if you look at the two maps, you can see that in the first one you got the hotspots, and you see there are very, very few, and they are concentrated into the center of the city. But when applying the Swedish crime harm index to it, you will see that it's more spread out, but still there are overlapping places. And here they could find that it was 25% of each of them that they would lose if they didn't fulfill the crime harm index and did the policing instead. The challenge here is that they are so spread out around the city to do this kind of policing. And we know from the London City experiment that is also done by a student from Cambridge, that you can't give the police officers too many places to go to. They had to reduce this really heavily before they could see a good outcome from the way of policing. Well, my index is not complete. So what happened was that a few years later, Fredrik Kärrholm went over here, contacted me and asked, can I develop your index further? He did. And he put on to all the crime codes for Sweden. He took all the crimes and looked at them, and he also took out all the sentences that was prison time given to the sentence. This went to be heavily criticized later on when one of the professors in Sweden looked at it, because there is not only prison time for different kind of petty crimes. You might have a fine, you might have something else that you need to do a community service, and that was not calculated into this version of the Swedish crime harm index. I had that in mind because I asked the judges to estimate if it would be a fine, how much would it be if you don't pay the fine? How much will it be in prison days instead? But to make it the full coverage, this was one way to look at it. And there is no follow-up from this in crime harm index, unfortunately. So what we've done since then, we keep on doing development. So we now got the third version of the Swedish Crime Harm Index. It's not yet published officially, it's still within the police and in one computer where we're working with it. I got one, of course, where I can look at it, but also we got one in Stockholm that is independent from the central system. It's a final judgment for every crime that's been put through a court or a prosecutor during 2019. But we look at prison time, we look at every kind of other kind of sentence that can be given to you due to that you are found guilty. And we calculated a model that is dynamic. That meant that we got one for 2019 that will be applied to 2022. Because 2019, all the sentences will be, how to say, you can't appeal any longer on them. So that's the reason why we need to use a few years back in time instead. So there will be a new one for 2020 that will apply on 2023. And it's a very easy calculation because these figures are sent to the Swedish police and also to the Council of Crime Prevention in that work national in Sweden. So those sentences are easy to get, and it's just a computer thing today because we made a program how to update. So it's just talk about hours to update it. It's added also not on the crime code, so we added it onto the legal room, as we call it, the legal description of each and every crime instead. That can also be really nice to know. And what we finally did is that we now got it on into the geographical information system that is used by the police. Just to make you an example how we calculated, if you look at the sentence in this one, there's a physical assault, the normal case, you can see that for the first part of it, people that got sentenced for prison, they got 4 months, that is equal to 130 days. And they are 17% of all the sentences. So that you need to recalculate it onto the basis that is only 70% of the 130 days. And then you do this for each and every of the following sentences that is given. And then you see the percentage, and then you will calculate it on the percentage from the 130 days. So for physical assault, you end up with 37 days. In my index, it's 60 days when the judges are independently given the verdict. But we got also political juries that affect the final sentence. So it's lower than it should have been if you only had trained judges putting out the sentence. So that's a calculation together, all of it. I just need to show you 2 other ones just to make you understand that when you come to murder, all murders are given a prison sentence, so it's equal to the 3,863 days. But when you look at rape, you can see there are a few other options that will be given out due to the case, and then you need to go back in and read the verdict if you would like to know exactly why. But for normal standard rape, if it could be normal to be raped, then it's 806 days. And it's less than what I had also in mind, but it's equal to what we find it to be in the country. So implementation, I would like to end to just tell that from my index, there are 16 different times that it has been tried. Both replicates on my own research, we find the overlapping places, but also that we've been looking at seasonal differences up in the north of the country, summertime, wintertime. We got full darkness 6 months and full daylight 6 months, and it was just totally different where you had the crime hard places and the hotspot places. And then we have had a few others like power few for domestic violence and so on. What we now will do also is to follow the program from the government that was given out 2019. It's still working, and it will still work for many years forward. The last one was there for 19 years, so we do hope this will be there for at least 15. And what they tell us to work evidence-based. What happened also now is in Sweden, the Swedish police authority written their own strategy on crime prevention. Every officer, whoever you are working, need to follow the crime prevention strategy, and the Swedish Crime Harm Index, of course, will be one of those that they need to be trained in. And I already do that training at my university now, at the Linnaeus University, and also a few others that I bring my service to. It will be put into the Swedish police system status, and you can find a map and everything like this, as I showed you earlier. What also is interesting for you to know, if you would like to travel to Sweden and learn more about the Swedish Crime Harm Index and a few others, is that there is a conference next year where Larry and Hatter will be, for example, and a few other well-known names. And there will also be a book on this. There are a few Cambridge associated that will be writing chapters into it, and it will be released in connection to this conference, and hopefully with the ongoing negotiation, it will also be translated into English and published for everyone else to be able to learn and understand. And best of all the municipalities will be by law responsible for crime prevention in Sweden from the 1st of July 2023. Imagine when they start to work with the Swedish Crime Harm Index. Future for everyone.